So without further ado now, I would like to pass it on to Amy Hughes. And Amy is a graphic designer and former music journalist, photographer, and publicist. Writing for the New England regional publication Metronome magazine, she interviewed numerous musicians like Don Henley, Bob Geldof, Richard Butler, Johnny Greenwood, Robin Hitchcock, Glenn Tilbrook, and dozens of Boston-based artists. And Amy is a microhistorian. She's currently presenting I Will Follow the Sun, The Beatles in Florida, which is a two-part retrospective on the band's visits to Miami and Jacksonville in 1964. So thank you, and Amy.
Yes, thank you very much. And if you, like I said, hear a little bit of a noise in the background, that will be my lovely four-legged accompanying Loki, a French tip. However, what you're looking at right here at the moment on screen are the guys, and they're actually in the Atlantic Ocean. And this is, I'm going to try and give some credit where credit is due for a lot of the images that you're going to see in the next couple of minutes here. This is Charles Traynor. He's actually a Miami Beach photographer. He took a lot of entertainers photographs and a lot of sports photographs as well that were happening down there in the 60s. So this is my presentation, Miami portion of I'll Follow the Sun, the Beatles in Florida. The overview for this is essentially covering 8 days from when the guys left New York. They left the Ed Sullivan Show for the first broadcast. They did a sort of what you would consider their first concert in Washington, D.C. at the Washington Coliseum. And we actually have some good news about that as well that kind of ties into the Deauville Hotel Rehab Renovation Rescue, RRR. And the biggest thing, of course, that happened is that the guys played on February 16th at the Deauville Hotel for the Ed Sullivan Show. And the image you see here is Paul, and this was actually taken by Ringo. So that was the headline for the Miami Herald that day, February 13th. 80 passengers, including the Beatles and their entourage, were in first class. They left JFK Airport, New York, at 1:25 p.m. on DC-8 National Airlines Flight 11. The images that you see here on top, this is the girl there on the left with the box of chocolates, it being close to Valentine's Day. This is at JFK. They're about to embark on the plane. This is 22-year-old National Airlines stewardess Carol Gallagher, and she is holding that box of chocolates. Later, she was interviewed and said that she had the biggest crush on Paul McCartney. The gentleman who is speaking to John Lennon en route to Miami is disc jockey Murray the K. He is talking to John, trying to get an interview for his radio station up there. I believe it's WINS, but I believe one of our other participants might be able to help me on that. But in regards to that, the guys were really tired. They're traveling. It's very cold in February in New York itself. So they're kind of actually looking forward to coming down to Miami on that day. John Lennon is with his wife, Cynthia. This is the only trip that she makes with him on a sort of tour slash sort of coming over, seeing everybody, and kind of getting an idea about exactly what John is actually going through and had been going through in the past year. There had been talk with Murray about them being very kind of concerned about what kind of reception they were going to get down in Miami, but everybody seemed to be okay with it. They tried to fall asleep, get some rest. Brian Epstein, their manager, had them up though before they landed to make sure that they signed a whole bunch of autographs for everybody. That was about 200 autographs that they made the band sign. The image on the right-hand side was taken by Ringo just as they landed at Miami International Airport. And this is the greeting that they saw when they disembarked off the plane. This is 3:52 p.m. February 13th. They're at gate 27, terminal 3. It is sunny and 80 degrees. George is turning around to look. It could be actually, I had a bunch of photographers come over with them. Harry Benson, who's a freelance photographer, good friend Bob Freeman, who you'll see off and on. His images came over with them. Larry Kane, who was a disc jockey at the time at WFUN in Miami, is on the tarmac at MIA, and he notes that there are approximately 5,000 kids waiting for them at the airport, ready to greet them. You can also see down there in front of the guys, we've got some bathing beauties that were there to greet them. Off to the left-hand side, trusty Mal Evans, one of the tour managers, and also the gentleman who I always find hysterical above John Lennon's cap with his mouth open, slightly balding. That is Brian Somerville. He is their press manager for the tour. He wrangles all of those press guys, puts them in line. So while there's an ambulance waiting on the tarmac, the crowd is starting to push forward on the plate glass windows, which are actually now starting to crack and shatter. So there's a whole bunch of girls up there. They're thrashing around. Screams are escalating. And Larry Kane's noticing that this whole thing is just evolving into some horror show. The Dade County Sheriff's officers are down there. They're trying to provide a ring of security. But the girls are breaking the line, starting to run through. Larry's trying to get closer to the guys in the limousines, but he's just not having a good deal with that. So they've got 30 bodyguards. The entourage jumps into 3 limos, and 8 motorcycle officers are going to escort them away from the airport. And they note later that from the press reports of everything that happened, that 23 windows were destroyed and airport doors were smashed. So you have a total war zone that had gone on down there. Total cost to the city of Miami for the melee, $2,000. Here are the guys. They're driving at, to backtrack a bit, they are here at the Deauville to do an extremely quick press conference. They were driving at breakneck speed. So the 8-mile trip, they made it in record time. They drove through red lights and they're driving on the wrong side of the road. Let's not talk about that. And they're at the Deauville. It takes them 12 minutes to get there from the limos to the inside of the hotel. So that's the quick press conference that you see. That's Brian again, Somerville. He's the one standing right next to John. This is, again, kind of a sparsely attended press conference by most standards for guys. So let's introduce the Deauville Hotel. It was built in 1957. Again, as we've noted many times, and if you're a Miami resident, you'll know that it was closed in 2017, first due to an electrical fire, and then Hurricane Irma came in and did more damage. There are 540 rooms. The Beatles and most of the entourage are up on the 12th floor. And much to George Harrison's consternation, he is going to be rooming with Murray the K. So Paul and Ringo are in room 1219. John and Cynthia have their own room down the hall at 1211. And Murray and George are in room 1218. So in the evening time, the Beatles went downstairs to the Deauville's Mau Mau Lounge to watch the Coasters perform. And Ringo apparently got a little upset that the band had been ruined by the clientele dancing the mashed potato. The band's pretty important to the guys because they were a very early inspiration. They had inspired the guys at the Cavern Club. They had done Searchin', which was a big hit. Paul liked to sing it. He got so many requests, especially from the girls at the Cavern Club who were called the cement mixers. They'd always be saying things to Paul like, "Play Searchin', Paul, play Searchin'." So the photos at 11 o'clock, past getting out of the Deauville, Murray took them over to see Hank Ballard and the Midnighters at the Miami Peppermint Lounge. The band had been to the one up in New York City. So that's the band with them there. Hank Ballard was the songwriter of The Twist, which was actually a B-side for their group. Of course, Chubby Checker took it to #1. And as a nice little FYI, Hank Ballard's cousin was Flo Ballard, who was in the Supremes. They also met the house band at the Peppermint Lounge, the BG Ramblers. And the BG Ramblers performed I Saw Her Standing There and I Want to Hold Your Hand in their honor. And they had their picture taken together. And the two older gentlemen right there are John Stankel and Jerry Zeminski of the BG Ramblers. They're holding a photo of themselves with the band. And they're actually behind Ringo in the older photo. But of course, again, they started to get recognized. After about 45 minutes, they had to leave. And they actually went to a place called the Record Bar afterwards. And actually, people noted when they left Miami, they had made a big purchase. Two of the big ones that they had purchased were Golden Goodies of 1963 and the Best of Major Lance. So room service the next morning consists of fresh fruit, fresh squeezed orange juice, coffee, eggs, toast with crabapple jelly, and also pastries, steak, and eggs. There's a short morning rehearsal at the Deauville, and it's at this time that they're joined for security by Miami Beach Sergeant Buddy Dresner. We'll be talking a little bit more about Buddy's involvement with the Beatles. So there's a scheduled photo shoot coming up. They were going to try and do it at the Deauville, but they had to scuttle that because there's just a mob scene of onlookers there. So this is going to be for Life magazine. John Longard, who just passed away very recently, was going to be the photographer. So the location for this photo shoot is going to be switched to a house on Biscayne Bay. It's owned by Jerry Pollock and her husband Paul. That's at 5750 North Bay Road. The house was actually designed by Melvin Grossman, the designer of the Deauville Hotel. All of this was kindly arranged by a friend of the band coming up at the hotel, Myron Cohen, but actually was a very close friend of Jerry's, and so he made the arrangements to get them over there because he was actually going to be on the Sullivan Show on the 16th. So they arrive at the Pollocks. Paul, George, and Ringo are in those little matching Deauville terry cloth jackets, and John has decided to wear his WPGC Good Guy sweatshirt, and that's actually from the radio station in DC who sponsored their show at the Washington Coliseum. So Jerry introduced her 3 sons and daughter to the band, and then she actually told them if everything goes well, hey, come on back the next day, which they actually did. So the 4 Pollock children, there's Linda, Billy, John, and Richard. They actually got into the pool for lighting adjustments. And so although it was sunny, it's kind of chilly. You can see George is a little like holding himself there. It's kind of a little cold. And so again, another backstory is that Paul Pollock owns the Thunderbird Motel at this time. And unfortunately, the Pollock house was also demolished very recently. This is John Longard at the Pollock pool, and a lot of the ones that you see of him taking photos and the further photos that you'll see are actually taken by Mr. Bob Gomel. If you're ever interested, wanting to know what they were doing in the pool besides just posing, they're actually mouthing, "I want to hold your hand for the final shot," and we'll have that coming up in the next frame or two. Now, contrary to popular belief, this shot did not end up as the cover of Life magazine, contrary, like I said, to popular belief. It showed up a few years later, but there was an interim photo director who decided that the Beatles weren't really that important to be on the cover, and so there was a shot from the war zone in Cyprus that was going on at the time. John did shoot it in color, but again, they never really used that transparency. He just held on to it. These are Bob Gomel shots of the band. They had a catered buffet lunch of ham, roast beef, turkey, lox, and bagels, although Paul had to ask Jerry Pollock, what are lox? More shots from Bob Gomel. You probably recognize the one in the upper left-hand corner. That's a pretty famous shot. The photo on the right side, that's Sergeant Dresner. He's driving the guys away from the Pollock household. But what's interesting to note is that John and Paul are leaning out of the car speaking to some black hotel maids who are waiting for a bus. They're at the bus stop. They're in front of the Montmartre Hotel, which is in the back. That hotel was demolished in 1981. It's a little unusual. Again, you have to remember this is February 1964. The Civil Rights Act was not signed into law until July of that year. So it's a little highly unusual to have this kind of conversation take place, but duly noted. And there's John's shot. This was the back page of that, I think it was a week later, of Life magazine. Same day, the guys are going to go aboard the Southern Trail in Miami Harbor. This lovely shot of a pelican was taken by Ringo. The color shots up top are also by Ringo. Murray the K arranged for the group and Cynthia to be driven over around 2 o'clock to go to Bernard Castro's yacht. It's called the Southern Trail after the photo shoot. Now, if the name might or might not ring a bell 50 years later, Bernard had his name gone into infamy because he invented the sofa bed, the Castro convertible. The Beatles producer George Martin was there with his future wife Judy, and so they came to join him on the houseboat. They went out into the harbor, but they had to turn back after about 20 minutes because a Miami News reporter and photographer, who were apparently, in quotation marks, invited by Mr. Castro, but not the band or their management, onto the boat, were caught as stowaways, and they had to go back to the dock. Paul demonstrated Can't Buy Me Love on the piano on the yacht because, of course, there's a piano on the yacht. And also he just wanted to make sure young George there, he's not quite of age to make sure that he doesn't get too much sun. So Sergeant Dresner reminded him not to take in too much sun. So we're going to go into an afternoon / late afternoon rehearsal downstairs in the Deauville. I'm not exactly sure where. I can only guess it's some sort of basement. Some might be familiar with the layout on the lower level of the Deauville at that time. George, you can see in the left photo, has a brand new 12-string Rickenbacker. This is actually a prototype. Only 2 were made. He never saw the guitar until this time because it was actually shipped to him down in Miami, and also because he was sick up in the Ed Sullivan time up in New York. He was very, very ill. His sister Louise had to come and take care of him. So this guitar, sight unseen, shipped to him. So he's trying it out. And in the right-hand photo, you can see in the black and white photo, John has taken over using George's country Gretsch guitar. They're also rehearsing at this time This Boy. So it's got to be some tight harmonies taking place. It's gonna substitute out Till There Was You, which they had been playing on the Sullivan Show. And so they're going to put in This Boy for the live broadcast. And kind of note, and I found this out very recently on the bottom photo with Paul playing drums, is that due to the clunkiness, thanks Loki, of the guitar, of the drum set for Ringo, they only brought over the snare drum. So you can see the difference in the skins on top of the drums. They actually gave Ringo brand new kit when they were in New York for the Sullivan Show. So the only pieces of the drum kit that were brought over were the snare and the cymbals, just too bulky. So you can see the difference in there as well. So after dinner, they reconvene up at the Deauville, and Murray the K, I just keep talking about Murray, love that guy, asks them all to come downstairs to the Musketeer room and take in the show with Don Rickles. The guys didn't know Don, weren't quite familiar with Don's rather unique sense of humor. They didn't quite appreciate it and only really kind of understood it much, much later. After the show, John and Cynthia, they go back, and the others are going to go to the second lounge for the late show with Myron Cohen and Carol Lawrence. Thanks, Loki. Also, you'll note too that the local CBS station down in Miami, WTVJ, they are going to be the ones to use the cameras. However, that night's national broadcast, they're going to actually paste over the local station logos with CBS. So here's another great shot. This is around 2 o'clock. This is going to be a dress rehearsal before an audience of between 2,500 and 3,000 people in the Napoleon Ballroom, which is where the broadcast is going to happen. But they realize now in the morning time that there's only going to be a few hundred fans who are going to manage to get into the theater to watch the rehearsal. John's carrying his brand new guitar. We now call it the Miami Rickenbacker, and it was made in a factory in California. He had met with the president of Rickenbacker in New York City, FC Hall, requesting a brand new guitar. The one he had, he'd just been hammering away on that for about 4 years. So he needs a new guitar. That is the one that you see that they are crossing the lobby of the Deauville, and they're going to the Napoleon Ballroom. We have Sergeant Dresner, a couple of other photographers. Paul's way there in the back. These are all shots of the rehearsal period. They go over the music and everything. They let the other acts kind of get into as well. A lot of these shots are from Bob Gomel's lens. And also they had a break there and they were trying to look for John during the break and they found him asleep. So they thought that was kind of funny. Paul goes, I thought he'd been kidnapped by the Detroit Stamp Out the Beatles gang. And the gentleman who's talking with George down there, that's Bernie Ilson. He's a public relations for the Sullivan Show. Here we got George, Martin, Paul, and 2 of the assistants for the Sullivan Show. And that is the rehearsal audience taken by Mr. Gomel. I love this shot. This is the Beatles with Ed and his grandsons Vincent on the left and Robert on the right. Vincent is 6, Robert is 9. Ed Sullivan's son-in-law was Robert Preck Jr. He was the show's producer. Here are the guys on the beach. This is probably from Ed Rudy, who was in radio, noted that this is down the road from the Deauville Hotel on the beach. And you're going to see several photographs by Bob Gomel, Bob Freeman, who came over with them as well, Charles Trainer from South Miami, and also Harry Benson. These shots you've seen probably dozens of times. The blonde teenager, she's 16 years old. Her name is Ruth Blythe Clark. Despite the many images of her messing around with the guys in the ocean, she actually declines an invitation to go hang out with them afterwards. A lot of people didn't know who she was. She kind of got lost in the history of the band, but she actually was ID'd by her family who lived in Portland, Oregon in 2015 after KHOU TV in Houston, which is where Bob lives now, did an interview with them and showed the photos. She passed in 2005. You can see also how much chaos there is there on the beach with the guys and John being surrounded by press and photographers and Mr. Dresner. Also, these photos are pretty famous. The ones of Ringo with 2 high school girls, Barbara Turkin and Carol Oleski. They were working as part-time models for a car show. So one of the photographers asked if they wanted to show up at the beach, have their pictures taken with the guys. They said, yes. They were invited back to the Deauville show, but after that, actually, Carol kept her distance. Her mom didn't want her to kind of hang out with the guys, and she had a boyfriend. But Barbara got the attention of Ringo. And also down there at the bottom, the girl to the right-hand side of the photo is Diane Levine. She was also kind of hanging around the beach, and she kind of hung out with Paul. They double dated at a drive-in, and Ringo actually did end up going to Barbara's house for dinner later on in their stay. He arrived in a moving van because he didn't want to be noticed, and her grandmother was there and ended up calling him Hugo. She actually ended up with a little gift of a ring with a gold R in it once he left, and it had a black onyx stone, and that has also been confirmed many years later by Ringo. I also just wanted to quickly show that there's been lots of talk about, well, you know, they wouldn't come. The Beatles wouldn't come unless they had a #1 record. But this contract was signed by Robert Preck Jr. and Brian Epstein with a little bit of a a little bit of a tweak here and there in November 1963. The guys were guaranteed, as you can see, the compensation, $3,500 to be evenly divided among the four of them. These photos were taken in the elevator at the Deauville Hotel because there's no backstage area to the Napoleon Ballroom. So they're coming downstairs and they're going into the elevators from their actual rooms. Jane Sologub, who was the South Florida Beatles Club president, she was invited to come in. She was interning at a Miami radio station. So she took these photos of all the guys in the elevator. The woman standing next to Ringo, her name is Ruth Regina. She's a makeup artist, and she was actually doing the makeup for Jackie Gleason, who actually, of course, was having his show down there at the same time. So here are the guys performing live at the Napoleon Ballroom at the Deauville Hotel. They're in front of about 2,600 people in the ballroom itself, although CBS television oversold it, and there were a lot of angry people outside the ballroom before they went live on the air. There was a lot of shaking of the van that was going to broadcast this thing out live. One of the people from the show actually had to go out there and demand the police officers, please stop shaking the van. So they actually were able to get on the air with about 2 minutes to spare. Brian Epstein, their manager, decided to watch the broadcast up in his room at the Deauville. He is with New Musical Express publisher Maurice Kin and his wife Berenice. Berenice got him to wear one of the Stamp Out the Beatles sweatshirt. It's not something normally that Brian would do. The sweatshirt itself was actually, the whole thing was a gimmick organization that was formed by the University of Detroit publicist W.T. Rabe, and he called it the Stamp Out the Beatles Society. So it was just kind of a fun little thing, never meant any harm to anybody, and the sweatshirt has actually gone off to auction. Pardon me. There's Ed. Ed actually got up after their gig and introduced Joe Louis and Sonny Liston, who were in the audience. The Beatles performed 6 songs. She Loves You, This Boy, All My Loving, and then I Saw Her Standing There, From Me to You, and I Want to Hold Your Hand. Show was watched by 70 million people, and it was actually rebroadcast a little bit later in the year. So also on the show were the comic duo of Marty Allen and Steve Rossi. Mitzi Gaynor there at the bottom with Paul at the after show. She was the headliner. She was paid $20,000. Myron Cohen was also on the show, and the Nerveless Knox, who are a high wire act, and that was pre-taped. The Unicycle Comedy Act up there at the top, they were friends. Scott Belden and Don Thompson, they were called the Volantes. They were from Portland. They were scheduled to appear and were there at the rehearsal, but because the Beatles set went too long, they actually never made it to airtime. But they said later, hey, didn't matter, they met the Beatles. Also at the bottom left, that is a plaque that was given to the guys from the University of Miami. They became honorary fraternity brothers. And again, this is kind of them kind of hanging out, leisure time. That's George. You got John at a boat, and that is Bob Freeman, their photographer, with John and Brian Epstein. They actually went on a powerboat trip around the harbor. This is a 23-foot speedboat. It's called the Cigarette. It was owned by Formula founder Don Arano. He's on the left there with guess who? Murray the K and the guys. There's no seats to stand on because the boat goes 60 miles an hour at top speed. John, Paul, and George got a bit seasick, but Ringo actually drove the boat, and he had a blast with it, although when he went back into the docking area, he bent the railing. This is kind of significant a little bit because this song was actually written by John in Miami, but the significance is that Dezo Hoffman was taking photos of them freelancing, and he took a lot of them wire skiing, and one of them was John with his hair pushed back. John got very upset about that later on during the time that they were filming A Hard Day's Night, and he kind of really chewed Dezo out for that. It was a little bit misguided. He probably shouldn't have been as hard on Dezo as he could have been, but he really let him have it. Although much later on, Dezo did acknowledge that he did make up with John in the early 70s. February 18th, I think we all know where we're going. Harry Benson was the one who initiated this whole scenario of getting the guys into the Fifth Street gym with Cassius Clay, who was going, of course, up against Sonny Liston. The guys really weren't too sure about the whole deal. They were pushed into a back room area. They got very upset because they actually didn't know where they were going once they arrived. And they were kind of led to believe that they were actually going to meet Sonny. And it all got switched around because Harry was just so great in selling them all about getting there. So it was actually going to be Cassius. The guys were not quite thrilled about that and set off a few F-bombs along the way. But it all worked out brilliantly, didn't it? With all of these wonderful photographs that came from them going through all of their little poses. The whole funny thing was Cassius would say things like, "You guys ain't as dumb as you look." John would say, "No, but you are." It all worked out though. They left, and then Clay goes on to fix work, and he does his workout, and then he just turns around to his manager and he says, "So who were those little sissies?" Brian returns to England on February 19th. The guys decide they're going to stay another few days. Sergeant Dresner shows them how to fish. I wanted to just touch a little bit quickly on Cynthia Lennon. She's, again, with John on this trip. It's her one and only trip to the U.S. with him. She's an illustrator and did a wonderful, nice little illustration here of herself downstairs in the Deauville at a boutique with one of the older women making a remark saying, "My God, did you ever see anyone as ugly as that Ringo?" So the guys decided that they would pay back Mr. Dresner, Sergeant Dresner, and his family and have some dinner over there, probably on or about a day before they left. So that's the guys with one of their road managers, Neil. Those are the kids with them. That's Barry and Jaredale and Andrea. They had a full cooked meal. They had a great dessert. And then actually posed for some photographs with the Beatles book monthly photographer Leslie Bryce. And Buddy took them all over the place, took them to a drive-in to see an Elvis Presley movie, fun in Acapulco. He hung out with them at the Deauville and got them to watch The Outer Limits. February 21st, up their tab, and that is them leaving the 12th floor. At the Deauville, you can see the very distinctive wallpaper with Sergeant Dresner to the left. They're going to go to New York City, get a connecting flight from there to London, and in London they are greeted by about 4,000 fans at Heathrow Airport. And that, my friends, is the end of this part of the presentation.
Good job, Amy.
Wonderful.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you so much, Amy.
Thank you.
Okay.
Daniel, hand it over to you.
Thank you. Okay, and as I switch over here, okay, there we go. I have to stop. Okay, so hopefully all the people on the video can see us okay. If you can't, just put something in the comments and let us know. I'm very, very excited to have this esteemed panel. And so we have Amy, who just made an awesome presentation. We also have with us Bob Kealing, founder of 3 Florida heritage sites, the Jack Kerouac House of Orlando, Graham Parsons Dairy Down, Winter Haven, and in 2019, the birthplace of the Allman Brothers Band, which is a Victorian house in Jacksonville's Riverside District, great historic district. We also have Gary McKechnie, who is a 2-time winner of the Lowell Thomas Travel Journalism Award and the author of the nation's best-selling motorcycle guidebook, Great American Motorcycle Tours. And he's also been a 2-time National Geographic author, among other endeavors, and is involved with Mount Dora's community building and a 501c3 up in Mount Dora, which is a beautiful area in Florida. And then we have Margot Winick with 20 years in strategic communications management at the University of Florida and University of Miami. And she is currently enrolled in getting a library science master's of science at Florida State University, and has done a lot of cool things, including the Beatle Brunch radio show. So I've been learning a lot about the Beatles through our new friends here. So thank you all. And finally, we are so privileged to have Commissioner Stephen Miner, who is a Miami Beach City Commissioner and a resident of Mid Beach and lives not too far from the Deauville. And Stephen has dedicated most of his 23-year professional career as an attorney to public service, fighting against fraud, and has been in Miami Beach since 2007, working with the SEC as well. So thank you to the panel. And this is just such an amazing part of Beatles history. Who would like to start off? And for those of us who might not be in particular Beatlemaniacs, but love the Beatles, you know, like me, in what spectrum, what kind of degree of fame did the Beatles have at the time that they came to Miami Beach? Bob, would you like to take a shot at that?
Sure. This is thank you so much, Daniel, for having me. Thank you for taking the time to put a spotlight on this important subject. I also want to thank Amy. I mean, that is a ton of work to put together that presentation. So Amy, great job. Also, Commissioner Miner, thank you for taking a leadership role in saving what is absolutely the most important Beatles landmark in the state of Florida without question. And I think this was a particularly important time for the Beatles because they had just hit #1 with I Want to Hold Your Hand in America. And they're on this upward crescendo where by April of that year, they hold the top 5 slots in the top 100 on Billboard. And it was just unprecedented. And, you know, the Beatles themselves were a bunch of kids from working class Liverpool who had never seen palm trees and beaches and sunshine like this, much less in the wintertime, and to see the beautiful women. And this was just an amazing experience for them. And it really is at an important sort of taking off point in their career. And the 8 days that they spent in Miami Beach that Amy detailed so thoroughly is the longest amount of time that they spent anywhere in the United States in this crucial first year, 1964 for the Beatles, when literally their music just exploded on the national consciousness of young people everywhere in America. So this is a crucial time for the Beatles coming to America for the first time, and the Deauville is an absolutely historic place within that story.
Yeah, I remember in one of our prior discussions, the mention about the first dinner. And I know Amy touched on that in the presentation, but I found it so powerful that, and is that correct, that the first dinner in the US at a family's home
was the first home cooked meal? Yeah. Yep. At the Dresdners.
Yes, it was. It was put together because the guys had actually expressed concern that Buddy was spending a lot of time away from his family, and that they really wanted to thank him and the family as for basically putting up with them. It was a hard job for Buddy to get and cajole and get everybody together. So this was just a nice big thank you, and they definitely appreciated it. And
Buddy was, for those of us that don't remember, one of the police.
Yes, he was a sergeant. He had actually done, and I know Gary, Margot, and Bob could also put some light onto it. He was well known. He had provided security for President Kennedy the year before, so he's got a big force down there, and they know that he could be the go-to guy.
Yeah, Chief Rocky Pomerantz of the Miami Police Department put Sergeant Dresner on detail. And he said that he worked out a deal with the Deauville Hotel to pay all off-duty officers who were assigned to guard the Beatles, essentially, $3 an hour per man. And this is essentially the same group of police officers that guarded President Kennedy when he had made a speech at the Deauville Hotel earlier.
So, I mean, if you think about even Miami Beach history, here you have one of the most famous bands in the world, and they go to have dinner and break bread with a Miami Beach resident who's also a member of the MBPD. So, I mean, it's just amazing part of American history as well. So as far as the current situation, I mean, I know a lot of the reason why people are here is not only to learn about the significance of the Deauville in the history of music and the Beatles, but also sort of what is going on right now. And anybody who's been around the building the past few years has seen the demolition by neglect. I don't think there's any other word we can call it from the current owners. And I give the city credit for taking the owners to task. It's a really groundbreaking, litigation that they're in now. And so I was wondering if we could speak and maybe get an update from Commissioner Minor, sort of in layman's terms, what measures the city has taken, and sort of what is the status?
Sure. So we'll talk a little litigation, and like you say, I'll keep it in layman's terms. It shouldn't be too hard, actually. And thank you, Daniel and MDPL, for putting this together and the entire panel. It's great to be here with all of you. And this is, as you said, this is a crown jewel of North Beach. It's an historic structure, 538-room hotel. Just a quick anecdote, actually. I had spoken to Bob Kealing, I don't know, about a month or two ago, and he had told me some good stories. And he also sent me a video that actually of the dinner at Sergeant Buddy Dresner's home. And so I watched the video, and it was nice. It was a cute video. Well, shortly after, I get an email from Jerry Dresner. Jerry is Buddy's daughter and the brother of Barry. I work with Jerry. I work at the U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission, and she actually works with me. And it was very ironic. And she's actually the little girl in that video that Bob sent me. So in the small world. So getting to the litigation. So in July of 2017, the Deauville shut down. So that's over 3 years already. And anybody who drives by, and I actually drove by the other day several times, can see how the building is in disrepair. So in February of 2019, the city of Miami Beach filed a lawsuit, which I think, thank you, and you recognized it, Daniel, well, that's an extraordinary step for us to take to bring a litigated action. But it was necessary, and we did so seeking, and I'll just use the terms and then I'll explain what it means, for injunctive relief, for damages, and for the appointment of a receiver. And really what was happening is that we were issuing violations that were being ignored, and notices that were being ignored. And we brought the lawsuit to force the owners to make repairs, and also to prevent the demolition by neglect, as you mentioned, Daniel. So properties within historic district in Miami Beach must meet certain minimum maintenance requirements, and clearly they're not. So we're bringing suit to enforce that, and potentially have a receiver to take over and manage the property. We also have a law in Miami Beach that basically says, because you can have a situation where an owner in a historic district could say, you know what, I'm just going to let the building be in disrepair, and then ultimately we'll just demolish the building, and what are you going to do about it? So we actually have a law in Miami Beach that says that if you do that, the presumption is going to be that you have to replicate the exact structure the way it was. You're not going to get any benefits out of doing that, and that's the presumption.
And
so
by the way, Commissioner, sorry to interrupt, but that is also a pretty much a brand new law that the commissioner is responding to MDPL and the preservationist concerns about the Deauville. The mayor and commission passed a law pretty recently, I think it was over the summer that it got approved, that really puts even more restrictions on the size of what could be built if a demolition by neglect were to occur. So
that's what we said. So we actually had asked, the city of Miami Beach had asked for an evidentiary hearing, which means that we would have sort of like a mini trial before the judge to make these determinations. There's no jury involved in something like that. But then COVID hit, and it's been delayed. So sort of on the good news front, I don't really know who the prior, I don't mean this in any reflection on the prior judge, but there is a new judge involved, and we're trying to get an evidentiary hearing so we can have some determinations. We did have a mediation on June 26th. Obviously, can't get into too much detail, but my belief is it's all, you know, talk is cheap. We got to see the action. So until we actually see some action, everything else is kind of moot. So I'm hoping that we can get that evidentiary hearing going. We can get some progress there. Ultimately, any development is going to have to be approved by the Historic Preservation Board of Miami Beach. And yeah, I mean, we're working hard. I've had 2 very lengthy conferences with our litigation team recently, talking about this case and different strategies. There's not a day that goes by that I am not doing something involved. It's such an important hotel for, I mean, you covered very well the historic nature of this hotel, this resort, but there's so many aspects to North Beach where this is such an important property. 538 room hotel. It has such an economic impact on the surrounding commercial businesses, the restaurants, everything around it has suffered tremendously because the Deauville is shut. And it would be an incredible boon to North Beach if we can get this hotel back into its vibrancy, which we know it all can be. And it's just so frustrating that it's not there, and you know it's still a ways away till we get there. And I'll just finish off, and this is sort of the last thing on my, but it does affect the city of Miami Beach as well, because we collect resort taxes for food and beverages and room rentals, and we lose that as well when the hotel is vacant. So there's many reasons to get this going, and I'm going to keep working hard at it. And you guys kind of keep me motivated. Your passion for the hotel. So thank you for that.
Well, thank you so much, Commissioner. And I don't want to call out the person, but I happen to see, it looks like one of the attorneys for the property owner is on the webinar. And so
Great.
we welcome that person. And hopefully they are recognizing through the amazing micro history that Amy showed, and just the outpouring of support, that the Deauville, as it is a jewel and a landmark, and is a real driver of North Beach's economy too. And we really want to get that back online as soon as possible. And we hope the owners will do the right thing. And I know the city has pretty deep pockets, and they I think are doing the right thing to fight for the site.
You know, Daniel, Gary speaking now. It's interesting that the 4 of us, Margot, Bob, Amy, and I, we started something called the 216-24 initiative, and that's sort of the umbrella group of what we're trying to do. And while we're using the Beatles as a hook, it's sort of a sexy topic. You know, hotels in America, if George Washington stayed there, those places are preserved. There's not many personalities that can stay at a hotel and people want to preserve it because that person stayed there. The Beatles stayed there. So that's the hook. But like Mr. Miner said, this is all a revitalization effort. You know, the Beatles stayed there, that's great. That's something that they can hang their hat on. But if you redevelop that entire district, you revitalize that. And I tell you, before it shut down in 2017, when people stayed at that hotel, literally people from around the world, they all wanted to stay on the 12th floor. They wanted to stay in the rooms that the Beatles stayed in. And it's going to be really exciting, as, you know, this is just the first step in an awareness campaign that's just going to keep going, because the owners can't do anything but save it. I mean, they don't have a choice. They have to deal with it at some point. And as this sort of awareness level builds, they're going to start to recognize the value in saving it. And if you want to learn more, we started a website called SaveTheDeauville.com, and people can get some background information about it, see some videos, see some pictures of the Beatles there. They can sign a petition, a change.org petition, to lend their voice to this effort as well.
No, and that's so great. Just talking about, you know, the potential of it. And, you know, Bob, maybe you could give us a little bit of, and I do see a few questions coming in from the audience, so we will get to those. But Bob, can you talk about, you've had success in making these these sites. I'm looking at your bio, Jack Kerouac and Allman Brothers, and even looking into Tom Petty's home. So can you talk a little bit about, the potential when you combine architecture and history with music?
Absolutely. And I do want to mention too that Margot has a Facebook page dedicated to the Beatles in Florida, and she
Yes.
started a petition with hundreds and hundreds of signatures. So that desire, I think, is there to see something constructive happen here with the Deauville. And I welcome their attorney being here, because it doesn't have to be adversarial. Let's work together. Let's save this valuable property. Now, with that being said, Gary touched on something interesting in terms of, once you're able to save this jewel, as the commissioner so aptly put it, there are opportunities, I would think, to create a Beatle-esque type district, something mid-century modern that reflects, the 1960s and Ed Sullivan and Muhammad Ali being at the Dundee's gym right there. And I think that would be a unique way to position that part of North Beach, which may be a little bit economically depressed at this point because of the Deauville being closed for so long. But in terms of what I've been a part of, the Graham Parsons Dairy down in Winter Haven, when I first wrote about it, I'm an author, and I wrote a book about Graham Parsons in Florida. And it was basically this storage facility that I think if I would have pushed hard enough, I could have just pushed it over. It was just run down, and yet it was right in the middle of downtown Winter Haven. And once we were able to draw attention to it, a public-private, mostly private collective got together. The owners donated the building. Downtown Winter Haven got together and collected in-kind contributions to do the painting, to do the electrical work. And to make a long story short, that started in 2013. A few years after that, it was rededicated as an historic listening room, where Graham Parsons, people significant to his career like Chris Hillman from the Byrds have come there and played. And the people who run it are very, very smart. And they take demographics of the people who visit there, and more than 50% are from out of the county. So you see this historic tourism aspect of it. And I think you take this to the nth degree with the Deauville, and you realize what potential is there with the right visionary people, starting with Commissioner Minor, staying on them. And we can't tell you how appreciative we are of your hard work on that. But those are some of the potentials that are there when you save these places, and they are part of popular culture, and it does resonate, and it does kind of give people a sense that there is history in Florida, that, especially from our neck of the woods in Central Florida, that actually predates Walt Disney. Oh my God, there was history here. Imagine that. So that's part of the idea behind it. And I also wanted to call out Gary and thank him especially for kind of getting me fired up about it, because he's the one who's been carrying the banner along with Margot. So thank you guys.
Well, that's nice of you, Bob. Let me just add a couple of things. I'm a native Floridian, and I've written about Florida history for quite a number of years. And you can go to the Don Cesar, the Renaissance Vinoy. You could go just down to Miami Beach along Ocean Drive and Collins Avenue and see how historic preservation can bring a place up. I mean, it happened in Savannah. They were knocking down homes, and then all of a sudden it's like, well, wait a second. What if we save these places in Savannah? This isn't a mystery. This happens all over the country. You preserve something that people want to see that has some historic value to it, and exponentially interest in that place increases. I mean, you've got the foundation, you've got everything there, you've got the hook to bring people in. And once this thing's over, this pandemic is over, boy, you can bet if that hotel were cooking by the 60th anniversary of their appearance by February of 2024, I mean, what a gold mine that would be. But it's just going to take a lot of grassroots support, people getting interested in it, going to SaveTheDeauville.com, signing petitions, helping Commissioner Minor preach this and get this out to the residents of Miami so they understand. But we're going to get to the finish line. It's just how quickly.
No,
And
absolutely.
the appeal, I would just say, the appeal to Beatles fans in new generations that are discovering the music is truly worldwide. And someone put a note in there about partnering with other museums. Well, there's a small museum of a guy who has a collection in Dunellen, Florida. I mean, there are, as I say, generations of fans who already flock to the Deauville and take pictures outside the closed gates. So it's just a matter of figuring this out and inviting them in, and really, just trying to harness, if you will, the energy that's around, celebration of the Beatles. And the Beatles won't all be here forever. So really, again, new generations are discovering the music. They're hotter than ever. They're the cover of Rolling Stone magazine this week. 50 years after Let It Be, they're still, what families share generation to generation.
And also,
Absolutely.
I just
Yeah.
want to add one quick thing too, Daniel, is what Margot spoke to is that all of the people that they touched when they were in Miami, they're still here, especially the Dresner family. And Buddy's son, Barry, is also working on getting recognition for everything that that his dad did. And that's really a big deal, especially when, like I say, when you consider they were only here for 8 days. It seems like such a long, long time, but it was a significant amount of time. And the fact that people want to be so connected to them in regards to the Deauville, which is where they spent almost all of their time, that's why it is so important to get that building up and running, and to help everybody in that area too as well, because a chain link fence and neon orange cones just don't cut it.
No.
Absolutely. And also, as far as Miami Beach, we like to think of it as a great collection of the best of 20th century architecture. And so starting from the Mediterranean through to the Art Deco, those are, South Beach, Mid Beach, and then up to MIMO, which is a style that we have focused a lot on the past several years in North Beach, making it a real MIMO destination. I think it's one of now the areas with the most Miami modern, mid-century modern in the state, I know, and maybe even the country. And so what better theme to connect the Miami modern, mid-century than the Beatles? I mean, it seems like a win-win. And we have the amazing North Beach band shell, which could be maybe a great spot for now to put together some Beatles type events while we work on the ownership of the hotel to get their act together. And maybe this becomes like the North Beach version of, Art Deco weekend with jazz. We could have a North Beach.
And Daniel, it's interesting. Bob pointed out to me a few weeks ago that the stage that the Beatles performed on is still in the Napoleon Ballroom. The hotel might be a little rickety now, but that original stage is still there. And it's really weird. I mean, if you like history, if you like music, that sort of stuff really gets you, and that's why you don't want to see it go. Another friend of mine, she was growing up in Miami when the Beatles were there. And I said, what do you like about the Beatles? And she said, it seems like they were your friends. And that always stuck with me. It's just like, they just seem so likable. Who knows what they were like really behind the scenes, but I think that's what hooks a lot of people into it. They were 4 guys, appreciated their good fortune, their talent. They were funny, talented. And it just like, you just wanted them to be your friends. And I think maybe that's the intangible part of this that I think really connects us. And it's sort of like you want to preserve that. It's like a nice memory. When everything's sort of going wrong, you can always go back to the Beatles and the fact that they were there. I think it bodes well for a foundational support for this entire effort.
Absolutely. Okay, well, so thank you all, the panelists. And before we go, though, I want to make sure we get to some of these great questions. So, Commissioner Minor, I've got a question from Tanya Bott, whose daughter with Julia made that amazing performance. What is the city asking of the Marijuelos? That's a family that owns the property. Is there an overall ask, and maybe I'm guessing, is it compliance with building and fire safety? And then I guess maybe more for the broader group, what can concerned residents and fans worldwide do to help exert pressure? So Stephen, whatever you're comfortable answering.
Yeah, no. So, I mean, there actually was a court order that outlined certain violations that had occurred and repairs of the building that needed to be fixed, and those have not been corrected. So but they're not self-enforcing, so to speak. You have to go back to the court and seek redress, and that's what the evidentiary hearing is about. So we're hoping to schedule that. It's been delayed because of COVID, but hopefully that will take place, and we can get redress that way. There's a damages aspect, and there's the receivership, to have a receiver appointed, which would manage the property. But also, I mean, there's certainly for example, there was a mediation, and certainly the goal is to get this building operational again, and come up with a plan that would comply with certainly our zoning laws, and come up with a plan to get this structure back up and running. So there's two components to it, right? There's obviously the litigation, but you try to resolve everything, and that's what we're working on, and we're not there yet. I'm just and I'm hopeful. Sorry, I'm always sorry I can't say more, but obviously there's an active litigation, so I have to be somewhat.
But is it safe to say, though, because this connects with Peter's question, would it be safe to say that mediation didn't resolve anything, and that's why the city is pushing forward on the evidentiary?
Well, I think you go on both fronts, right? Until something, like I said, you can have good conversations, you can make progress, but until something's actually done, until there's actually a concrete plan, it's just conversations. So you still have to seek the redress that we're seeking. We brought a litigation for a reason, and again, it predated my time as commissioner, but that's a serious step. It's a serious step to take, and we did it, and we're still trying to seek the purpose of the suit has not been met yet, because we still haven't. We brought suit to prevent the demolition by neglect, and I don't think we've accomplished that yet. So we have to continue going forward. As far as things that can be done, I mean, any type of outreach and conversations and showing the public is interested, like this type of event, I always think is a positive. I mean, there's certainly an economic side to this. I think what's helpful is hearing, which I know, but maybe for members of the public, which I've heard this panel say, there's so much economic opportunity with this hotel, the historic nature of it, the Beatles, everything about it. It seems like this can be a very rich economic boon, not only to the hotel, but to the entire surrounding area. So it seems like a no-brainer to me, and hopefully we'll get there.
Okay.
Commissioner,
Gary, do you want to chime in?
Oh, I'm sorry. I have a quick question for the commissioner.
Sure.
Are the owners entertaining any interest in someone else purchasing the hotel and doing something with it? I've got $50,000 I'll put in.
I actually don't know the answer to that question. I don't know. I think that's something on. I mean, that's something I think only they would know. I don't know.
Yeah, it'd be interesting. Peter wrote, it'd be interesting to know sort of what are the owners' ultimate motivations. But I guess that's something that, maybe will come out through the process. I had Jack Johnson, the chair of our board. Hi, Jack. He writes, if successful with the Deauville, will the city pursue similar actions to protect other historic buildings from demolition by neglect? And before Stephen answers that, I want to mention to everyone that another thing that came out of this unfortunate situation is that this year the city is starting a new database of vacant buildings, and that's going to be something that's published regularly. I think things are a little different now than in the 1980s with preservation. Now we have almost 3,000 buildings protected. And so tracking them is not as straightforward as it used to be. And so the city taking that step to help catalog vacant properties is going to help MDPL and other community groups to, encourage the city. And Steve, what do you want to respond about the city's interest in protecting historic buildings from demo by neglect?
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't be able to get into specifics as to whether it's contemplated in other cases. I don't think that would be appropriate for me to do. But I think it shows the seriousness as to how we want to protect our historic buildings, and we have laws on the books. They're there for a reason. We take them seriously, and when they're violated, we've shown we will act to enforce them.
That's great. Well, I know we've gone over time, but I want to thank you all, and our virtual audience could give you all a virtual round of applause. For those of you who would like to learn more, check out savethedeauville.com. Please make sure you sign the change.org petition. Commissioner Stephen Miner has a Facebook page you could follow. Margot has the amazing, tell me the name exactly, Beatles group.
Yes, it's on Facebook called Beatles in Florida.
Beatles in Florida, thank you.
Yeah.
Beatles in Florida, which I went on there and I was like shocked. They have so many really smart people putting all sorts of info about the Beatles' time in Florida. Bob, what's a project, or how could people follow you?
I'm actually writing a book about the Beatles in Florida, and I'm going to be tracking what happens with the Deauville, and it is an amazing story. 1964 was an amazing year in Florida as it is, but the Beatles' time here is remarkable, and I would hate to see the Deauville be lost because it's right in the middle of all of it. So hopefully in another 2 years it'll be out.
Well, let's pledge it. We'll have hopefully a special Beatles celebration at the Deauville to enjoy your book.
That sounds
And
wonderful.
sometime soon. And Gary, how could people stay in touch with you?
Probably through the SaveTheDeauville.com website. That's just taken shape, and I'll add some contact information there. And I understand, Daniel, that 70 million people tuned into this Zoom telecast this evening.
Not quite. Oh, but by the way,
you might explain the significance of that, Gary.
Oh.
But a little trivia point, I believe the Beatles show in Miami was it one of the top TV broadcasts at the time?
Yes, it was.
Yeah, it was absolutely. Ed ruled Sunday night. There was nobody that could actually compete against him at any other time. And because it was the Beatles, everybody was looking forward to seeing them in another venue, and it was Ed. And as Ed had said back in New York, he goes, just stay tuned for Miami.
And
All
the
right.
interesting thing is that Amy knows the name of every one of the 70 million people who watch the show.
Yes,
Well,
that's
Amy,
my database. That's
I
my
feel like
database, Daniel.
like we're at the after show already, but
Yeah.
But Amy, I wanted, and so anyone that wants to sign off can, but I want to mention that I had not heard the term microhistory before, and I find it fascinating that you are able to really make an outline of this one seminal event timeline. I'm sure that's very challenging.
Yeah, that took more than 8 days, that's for sure, to find out where. The thing is that you think you find something, and then you find something more. And I want to thank Bob Kealing for helping me along with the word granular, because that's what I do. I get into the granular. And actually, I've told everybody I will go subatomic. For any further information that you have about the Beatles at the Deauville is more than welcome. I have obviously a ton more. I apologize for going slightly over 30 minutes. There's just so much to talk about. But being a micro-historian just really focuses in on the time that they spent in Florida. In fact, there's a second part to my presentation because they did come back to Florida later in the year, and that's when they were at the Gator Bowl in Jacksonville, and they spent time in Key West. Prior to the hurricane that came through up in Jacksonville at that time.
Oh, wow. Well, thank you all again. And for those that are asking if this is being repeated, we will have this on our YouTube. Please make sure to check Miami Design Preservation League on YouTube. And, you know, let's stay tuned. Hopefully this is a start of working with the Beatles in Florida fans and Beatlemaniac. I hope that's not politically incorrect. But I think it's the start of many good things. So we'll be signing off now.
Thank you very much.
Thank you,
Thank you.
everybody.
You guys.
Thank
Thanks.
you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.